And welcome back to another all-new edition of No Holding Back, our hockey edition. Fred Pletsch in the left side of the screen. Freddie, how are you?
I'm great, Ben. Glad to be along again.
Yep, good to be with you. And Matt Ford, we go way back to Cleveland. We'll get into that as we go along. He's been with the Griffins now for a few years. Their captain and leading the charge. Matt, how you been, man?
Thanks for having me on. Doing well.
You bet, man. You bet. So one of the things that we've been doing with a lot of the guests, like we'll do with you, is we'll kind of go from point A to point B in your career. But the last time I saw you was 2010-11, my last season in Lake Erie. I don't know if it was yours, but you had 26 that year, man. You led our team.
That's it was right. A long time ago, but fond memories playing in Cleveland. I enjoyed my time there, and even going back there now, it's a special place. It was, even though I'd played in both Charlotte and Hartford, I really felt like I established myself as an American League hockey player there, and the opportunities given to me there kind of propelled my career.
Yeah, and you've been on a handful of teams in the league and become a journeyman of the league, which we'll get into. And I hate to bring this up, but you're now in your mid-30s, right?
Yeah, 35. It goes by quick. I remember days in Cleveland like it was yesterday.
Right on. So let's get the story started. Freddie will kind of get us underway in that regard. Freddie.
Well, just doing some cursory background on you, Matt. You can take the Canadians out of Toronto, but you can't take the hockey out of the Canadians. And it was your grandfather, I believe, that wound up in Cali. How much of that backstory do you know, or you just knew you were raised with hockey?
It's a big part of the reason I'm playing today. So I have a ton of pride in the fact that when my grandfather moved 4 boys out in the early 60s to Los Angeles to work for American Airlines, he was one of the founders of one of the hockey programs there, Bay Harbor Red Wings, and all 4 boys played hockey there growing up in Los Angeles. My father continued on and played semi-professional, and even in my youngest days, maybe when I was 4 or 5, my earliest memories are being in the locker room with his team, and I idolized those guys, and I knew right then that's all I wanted to do was play hockey. And even though we talk about my role playing in the American Hockey League, I'm really grateful for everything that kind of came up in that.
So you wind up at Shattuck. Was it tough to leave? I mean, it's a boarding school. You go and play there, and played with an NHL All-Star team basically by the time you were done, huh?
Yeah. When I was in 8th, 9th grade in Los Angeles, it took a huge toll on my parents to be able to play for, at that time, a really competitive team. They just started AAA hockey, and the closest team was on the other side of Los Angeles. So you're looking at 40, 50 miles traveling down there multiple times a week. We'd be living in the car, coming home from work. It was going to be really tough. And one of my goals at a young age was to play prep school hockey. My 8th grade Bantam team traveled to the New England area, and we got to play against a bunch of those freshman teams. You think of Brookshire, Avon, some of the JV teams there, Salisbury. And I think it was, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's Cranbrook in Michigan.
Yes.
I did a visit.
Yep.
But I did, besides my team going to play in New England, I did a personal visit at Shattuck, and I fell in love with it. One of the biggest things was the opportunity to be on the ice almost every day from the start of the school year to the end of the school year, which is a little different than maybe some of the New England schools. At the time, I didn't know what kind of quality hockey that it would be, because a lot of the NHLers that came out of there ended up being there while I was there. But I was fortunate to have that opportunity. I just wanted to be on the ice every day. I didn't know there'd be that quality of hockey players there.
Yeah, you went on to play just at Wisconsin with a star-studded team, but just from Shattuck, Sidney Crosby, Ryan Duncan wins the Holby, Jack Johnson's a first rounder, Drew Stafford celebrated collegian. You keep in touch with those guys, or is it kind of just the Shattuck reunion time?
Well, one of the things you have to remember, I went there for 4 years, but I didn't make the prep team until my senior year. So I was kind of late bloomer. One of my first days being on the ice at Shattuck, I realized how good everybody else is and how hard I was going to have to work just to make the prep team. And fortunately, I put myself in that position my senior year. I got to play on a line with Crosby, played with Stafford at time, those guys that you mentioned, Brian Salcido, Matt Smaby. There's a handful of games. Over half the guys probably played Division I or juniors, and 6 or 7 on that team played in the National Hockey League. And I do keep in touch with a lot of those guys. It's funny you say that. One of my line mates there, Zach Harbor, lives down the street from me in Chicago, and we got 2 kids about the same age. And my childhood best friend, Brian Salcido, who went on to play at Colorado College in the American League in Europe, and also played for the Anaheim Ducks. We grew up together, and we played on those teams, and we ended up being each other's best men. Talk to him every day. So it was a special group, special bonds made there. And that's one of the places I really owe the credit, being able to play hockey like I do today.
Yeah. One of the great things about a prep school, you get to play other sports. And I know USA Hockey kind of likes to follow that. What else did you play at Shattuck?
Lacrosse. I thought that was going to be the biggest kind of conversion to hockey. And they didn't have a team there until my freshman year. And so pretty much all the freshmen played on the lacrosse team, and we got our butts kicked for 3 seasons. And by our 4th year, we were pretty good. And we held our own. So I enjoyed it. That was the only lacrosse I ended up playing, but a lot of the guys jump into other sports in spring as well. But as I was saying, it's hockey. At least when I was there, it was a hockey school, and you get your schoolwork done, you put yourself in position. A lot of those guys wanted to go on, and their goal was to play Division I hockey, and a lot of those guys were able to with the group we had.
Speaking of Division I, Matt, so when you get to that point, what was the recruiting process like for you, and what were the schools that were in the mix for you?
Well, Ben, like I was saying, it wasn't until my senior year that I made the prep team. So it's a while back thinking back on it, but my junior year, you start looking at schools that you might be interested in, and I wanted to continue to play hockey, and at the time, not being on the prep team, I was looking at Division III schools, writing those schools. The same time that that's the first time you're taking the spring semester, you're starting to take the SAT and ACT for the first time, I think. And I was really thinking that maybe juniors, maybe play Division III, and senior year, being fortunate to be on the prep team, and having the season that I had, I started getting interest from schools, and it was slow, but I ended up writing those schools, but it wasn't exactly what I was looking for. I was very close to going to Army. I actually loved everything that they offered, but one of the things that, like I said earlier, I wanted to play hockey, and I knew there was this commitment on the backside of going to Army. And Tom Ward, who not only is an unbelievable coach there, but a mentor kind of gave me the recommendation. He said, go play a year of juniors. If you want to go to Army, that'll still be on the table, but I'm pretty sure you're going to be able to go wherever you want after that. And I took his advice. I looked at going to the WCHL in British Columbia. A lot of players go up there in Canada. And being from the West Coast, a lot of guys from California are up there. But also, I looked at the USHL playing at Shattuck in the Midwest. There is a lot of recruiting and everything for the USHL as well. I thought the best chances for college and everything else ended up being in Sioux Falls, where I might get an opportunity. And that was my next step, was going to Sioux Falls and trying to work myself in a position to get a Division I scholarship.
Who was your coach there, and what are some of the notable guys you played with in Sioux Falls, Matt?
Kaufman was the coach, and he had, at the time, I believe he had mostly coached pro hockey. So I think there was this learning curve of changing it up and coaching junior hockey and working with. You have to remember, a lot of these guys are kids and still in school. I had obviously graduated the year before, but we didn't have the best team, and including that, I had a slow start out of the gates. Jim McKenzie was my center once I got going. Ended up going to Michigan State, played pro hockey for a while. The end of the year, I think Nate Prosser, a few guys were called up, but it was a rough season. And it wasn't until midway through the year that I kind of figured out the junior game and was able to have a decent season and put myself in a position. And like we talked about Wisconsin, I started getting, I think it was January or something like that. I had some really good weeks where I think I had some big weekends putting up points, and it seemed like every school started calling at once when they wouldn't even pick up my call when it was the other way around. And Wisconsin was there, Maine was there. I'd always grew up wanting to go to Colorado college, knowing a handful of these youth hockey players that I idolized growing up. There was this huge connection of California kids going to Colorado college, and Brian Salcido, my close friend I mentioned earlier, went there. All three of those came to the table. Maine was when I was a little kid, watching the Frozen Four, watching Paul Kariya in the early 90s. I wanted to go to Maine, and so every school I wanted to go to came to the table. But I went on a visit to Wisconsin and fell in love with everything there. I thought it was an unbelievable school. Obviously, great hockey program. You look at the guys that were there at the time, and it was a no-brainer for me to go to Wisconsin.
So I know College Hockey Inc., part of their marketing platform is referring to college hockey as the 4 best years of your life. Do you agree with that statement?
I had an unbelievable time. Wisconsin isn't just known for hockey. I got a degree while I was there. I met my wife, Cassie, while I was there, and some of my closest friends. So I had an unbelievable 4 years there, and we obviously won a national championship. One of the goals that I had going in there was being part of something pretty special, and I had that opportunity to be part of that 2006 team. That handful of those guys are still playing today. Big names in the NHL like Joe Pavelski and Brian Elliott.
Yeah. How was Adam Burish back then? Was he as vocal as he was once he got to the league? And I always remember him being such a great talker, and he never seemed like he held anything back, Matt.
Yeah, I really looked up to Adam. I thought when he was there, he found that role to be a big contributor at the college hockey level game. He played on the top line with Robbie Earle and Joe Pavelski, and kind of led the way. He was kind of ignited that fire. He was competitive, and he did that on an everyday kind of basis. And I just remember when I played with him his junior and senior year. He won as a senior the national championship, and I remember showing up and thinking summer hockey was going to be guys dipsy doodling and going around, and he was two-handing guys and checking guys, and at first I I kind of got a little sour about it, but looking back on it, I appreciate how competitive he was, and he pushed us, and that team probably doesn't get to where we were without him. Not only that, but you have to give him credit, because he wasn't that. He kind of turned into an instigator, kind of got under a guy's skin when he got to the National Hockey League level, and he carved out a career doing whatever it took to get there. And so you have to give him credit, because he wasn't that kind of player in college. He probably had a little bit more skill, but he found that in his game to give him an opportunity.
That national championship season, your Badgers were able to win it without even leaving the state. The regionals for you in Green Bay, then
How convenient.
Then
easy for the travel guys.
But just the WCHA in those days, that's when the WCHA was on that run of seemingly winning the Frozen Four every year with Minnesota and Denver and Wisconsin and North Dakota. I mean, it was just a gauntlet of great teams every night, was it not?
Yeah, Minnesota won back-to-back ones there. Denver won back-to-back ones, and we got one in there. Seemed like it was probably one of the most competitive leagues in the nation for sure. Some really good hockey players came out of it.
Yeah. And then I told Ben beforehand, you probably don't know it, but you played in the first hockey game televised by the Big Ten Network, part of the College Hockey Showcase in 2007. Your team played at Michigan State and Michigan back-to-back. Did you realize it then? I mean, Big Ten Network, coast to coast, and away you go.
No, I don't remember it at all. I don't want to date myself, but it all seems like a little bit of a blur. But I don't remember the game specifically, but there was always that. Even though it was a WCHA, and it's pretty cool to see the Big Ten and see that competitiveness now. But there's always that series in November around Thanksgiving, playing Michigan and Michigan State. So it was important to play those teams.
Yeah, that was the College Hockey Showcase.
Yeah. For you guys, Matt, Minnesota was the big rival. North Dakota was also in there too. But just take us inside of some of those games, man, a little bit, and the heated rivalries and some of the guys that you played against in those games.
Yeah. Well, you talk about North Dakota. When you first step into the Ralph, it's unbelievable. Not only is it beautiful, but when there's 10,000 packed fans, that's your first experience like that, and it can be quite intimidating. A handful of those guys seemed like Shattuck had a pretty good connection of players going from Shattuck to UND, so there's some familiar faces on the other bench, but that definitely didn't make it easier. But there weren't many, and I don't know what it's like now. With kind of the reconfiguring of the leagues, but it didn't seem like there was many off nights. There was no easy points when you're playing in the WCHA back then. CC was very talented. They had some unbelievably talented teams. Denver, it seemed like maybe, is there maybe 10 teams, 10, 11 teams? I felt like 6, 7 of those teams were in the tournament every year. Yeah. So I thought maybe it might even be harder to win the WCHA than it would be a national championship.
Well, to your point, I mean, I've been doing the NCHC since the split for 7 years, and it's still the same in North Dakota. It might even be worse now in terms of their fans. And I talk to coaches and players, and Fred and I've had a couple on here on doing this podcast, and it's you get out of that conference. There's a reason why Duluth has won the last 2, and there's a reason why Nodak won 1, and a reason Denver won 1 with a guy that you're playing with that we'll get to, Jared Lucas Savages. you get through that, man, you can get through anything. That's what guys tell us. So it sounds like that's the way it was when you were playing in the Dub.
Yeah, there was definitely a learning curve, and we went through the growing pains to kind of get where we did and be able to
Yeah.
win.
Yeah. Freddie?
All right.
Well, as you begin your pro career, Matt, all over the years, you'll talk to players coming from the junior ranks in Canada. You talk to players that have played college hockey, and I remember being in dressing rooms and hearing junior players say, "Man, I wish I would have went to college." But you never hear a college graduate say the opposite. So you've got your degree. I think yours in consumer science, and then it's like, hey, I love this game. I'm going to play it as long as I can. Is that kind of the attitude that you develop and evolves over the years?
Yeah, I majored in consumer science and minor league hockey. So, but I was very fortunate to have those years. I was a role player in college, and I definitely learned the two way side of the game. That's for sure. And when I got out, I had been drafted going into Wisconsin by the Chicago Blackhawks back when they had some tough seasons, and I want to say they had 15 draft picks in 2004. I think I was the 14th pick by the Hawks, and I obviously every guy's goal that plays at any level is to play in the National Hockey League. And I remember when I was done, I kind of thought maybe I'd get a chance with their American League team on a tryout basis, or maybe not get rich, but maybe sign a contract with them. And I remember finding out a couple days after my season ended, my senior year, my agent at the time had called and said, "Well, Blackhawks aren't going to sign you, but you can play wherever you want on the East Coast." So it was a little bit of humble pie when I was got out of college. I knew I didn't have the numbers that were flashy, but I was still motivated to see what would happen. And that's where kind of things got started with my pro career. I gave them 3 teams that I didn't know how long I'd be playing, if I was in the East Coast Hockey League or how that was going to work out. But of the 3 teams, Charlotte ended up being the one to sign me, and the interest there was my wife, my girlfriend at the time. Her family was down in Charlotte. I wanted to be close to my family, maybe out in California, or when the East Coast League used to be out there, or in Charlotte, or I had some teammates with Gwinnett. I ended up signing with Charlotte, and that ended up being my first opportunity with pro hockey.
What's the closest you ever got to getting called up? I mean, to the NHL. I mean, that's what it's all about.
Yeah, in 2011, 2012, I was having a pretty good season. I had signed the year after you and I had been together, Ben.
Yep.
I was playing for the Hershey Bears. I had signed my first contract with the Washington Capitals, and we were in first place in the entire league. And I remember the GM at the time in Hershey asking if I wanted to re-sign, and I told him I wanted to play one game in the National Hockey League. And a few weeks later, I was traded to the Philadelphia Flyers. So I ended up going to Adirondack, but it was a blessing in disguise. In Hershey, they had some unbelievable players up there in Washington. They didn't think I was going to get that opportunity. But I got to Adirondack, and there was a need for the type of player I was, and given that opportunity, I think I had 20 goals in the last 30 games of the season, and that was one of my best stretches of my career. And I re-signed for the next season. I was a black ace with them in playoffs, and I thought I put myself as close as I could, but it didn't work out. The next year ended up being at least the start of the year was a lockout, and I didn't have the same kind of success under a new coach. But I can't look back and say I didn't give it every opportunity. I played for 9 professional hockey teams now, and I had different goals at different times. First, it was just making to the American Hockey League, and what I was being in Washington's, signing an NHL contract with Washington, being in Philadelphia's organization, and Columbus's organization. I moved around and did everything I could to play in the National Hockey League, and when that was done, I knew there was still something very special playing in the American Hockey League, and that's where I'm at right now. I wanted my goals kind of readjusted. The dream doesn't go away, but I'm also realistic. I have 2 kids, and I'm married now, and I have to make decisions for my family that I wanted to be in a place where I could be part of something successful, and that's one of the reasons I was in Edmonton's organization in both Oklahoma City and Bakersfield, and ended up in Grand Rapids.
Yeah, Matt, I want to go back to when we were together. Like, and you probably didn't even think of this at the time. You're in a role to me now in your career, like guys like Brian Wilsey and Hayes, Darren Haydar. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I actually just saw Hayes at the All-Star game. He was getting inducted into the Hall of Fame. It was pretty special to go catch up with him.
Yeah, awesome.
Sorry to take that away from you.
No, it's all good. And I want to get him on too. And so, but during that time, I mean, it's early in your career, so you're probably not. All you're thinking is, I got to do what I got to do to get called up. Were those guys that you gravitated to, or were there other guys in that group that we had? The older guys, what I'm saying.
Yeah, I think was Wilsey there my first year? Then
I believe,
in 09,
yeah,
09, 010.
I believe he was, yeah.
I obviously looked up to those guys. I can't look back and remember how many games, but Wilsey had a pretty successful career, and that alone in the National Hockey League, at least triple digits games, maybe a few hundred. I'm not sure exactly, but
you're right.
You want to know what it takes. And he got there, and he was there for a long time. And I think every guy that's in the American Hockey League wants to be there. So you look at what it takes, and you kind of try to take a little something from them. And they were good leaders. They were guys that I kind of look back on my career and where I'm at right now, and I try to be that same kind of guy as a mentor to the younger players.
Yeah, I mean, go ahead, Freddie.
I mean, it is a real special, almost unique role, because the American League's a damn good league. You have to get it done on the ice, but having been through everything that you've been through in terms of almost getting called up, it used to be, a player assistant coach in the 70s or 80s. Then it becomes, he's a glue guy, he's a real character guy. So you get it done on the ice, but also teams are hiring or signing you because they know you're a mentor for those younger players, and they know you're a character person who's going to bring them along the right way. So that's a great role to play, and let's be honest, can still be a pretty good living, can it not?
Yeah. I'm having a blast. I still love playing hockey. And I've said it before, I'm gonna try to do this till they kick me out of the league. It's pretty special. I looking at it now, especially with boys of my own, having them around the locker room, it comes full circle from when I was a kid, being in the locker room with my dad. Still having fun. But at the end of the day, I know I need to be able to play. It's one thing to be a good mentor and a good teammate, but especially right now with everything going on, first and foremost, you have to put in the work. You learn that from some of those other guys, but it seems like every year you have to work a little bit harder, a little bit smarter to be able to keep up. The game's way quicker than it was 10 years ago when you and I were together, Benny.
Yep.
And those are changes that I have to make in my game to be able to keep up with the league. I've never been the quickest guy or the prettiest guy, but I try to be effective and carve out a role. So first and foremost, you got to be able to play, but you also have that desire too. And I feel like I have both still.
Fred, I mean, watching Matt play when I did, man, that's one thing I could always say, man. He worked his ass off every time he was on the ice, no matter what it was. And I know you can tell that from talking to him, obviously. And that's just the kind of player that I remember. I remember those 26, man. You led our team that year. We went to the playoffs that year, and unfortunately, we didn't get out of that round against Manitoba.
Yeah, looking back on that year, playing for Coach Quinn there in Lake Erie, I was really privileged that they gave me the opportunity they had. A guy coming out of camp making it on a tryout, it doesn't happen very often, and I haven't seen it very, very often since. But we had a special group that I believe that was the first team in Cleveland in that organization to make the playoffs. I thought maybe we could have done more, but it's funny, you look back at how many opportunities you have. They go by quick, and you only get a couple. And we had a special group, but weren't able to get it done that year.
Yeah, it was a fun team, no doubt. Freddie, go ahead.
Well, it's almost understood, I would think, Matt, that should you so desire, there would be a coaching role at some point down the line in your future. Is that something that you think could happen, or you've got the great thing about college, you've got that degree in your back pocket and could do basically whatever you wanted to do, but coaching allows those who still have that passion, that love of the game to keep doing it. Playing, it's as close as you get to having an impact, to having an influence on the game each and every night.
I still love playing, and when I am done, whenever that is, I can't imagine doing anything else besides staying in hockey one way or another. So that's obviously a goal of mine. But in the present moment, when you talk to players that are still grinding it out, I don't think about it too much, because I think when you start planning too much, you're pretty much done. So for now, my goal is to whenever this is done, whether it's most likely what it looks like is next season, to be prepared. So to answer your question, yeah, I don't want to do anything else but be in hockey, whether it's maybe something involved with my boys as they get older. I have a boy about to turn 4, and all he wants to do is play hockey, or if it's on the pro side, I'd love to have that opportunity. Did
you ever have an opportunity to go overseas? That seems to be a natural progression. Sometimes it's just circumstance.
Yeah.
Family would ever dictate, no, I'm staying in North America. But did you ever consider that option real seriously?
I definitely looked at it. Usually, kind of when we went through my timeline, and when it seems like those opportunities might be past you to make it to the National Hockey League, a lot of guys, a lot of close friends, teammates, you end up going over there to have a new adventure, and have a different kind of hockey experience. But my wife, one of the reasons I've never gone over partially is my wife has an unbelievable job here. She's able to work from home, but we'd have to stay over here in the U.S. And I especially where we're at right now, I can't imagine leaving my family. So partially that, partially number two, I know I'm meat and potatoes kind of guy. We talk about my days at Wisconsin where I was a little bit of a grinder. I kind of know my skill set, and I can't imagine going back like college hockey and playing on a big ice sheet. I can get around on an NHL size ice sheet, but getting into my late 30s, I can't imagine having to skate more than I already do. So I doubt I'm going to be in Europe anytime soon.
Speaking of that, the college days. So Fred and I and Sean Richland did that regional we were talking about earlier. Speaking about getting around, remember, Freddie, remember John Mitchell? I know Matt does. He was his teammate. He could scoot a little bit for a big dude.
Yeah, walk on.
Was he? I didn't remember
Yeah,
that.
yeah. I remember I think he'd played in Green Bay in the USHL and joined us midway through a season, and maybe practiced with us for part of the year. And by the end of his 4 years at Wisconsin, he had all the tools. He became a pretty good hockey player and ended up playing against him in pro hockey for a while too. I believe he was Syracuse or Norfolk, maybe with Anaheim's organization.
All right. So I'm looking at your roster now. So correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you dropped the mitts with Brian Lashoff when we were together, didn't you?
I don't believe so.
No.
There was a guy in Grand Rapids. I don't drop him often, but
Yeah.
it's not usually on my highlight list either. So I couldn't give you a list of the guys that I dropped them with.
That's
But
all right.
Lash is one of my closest teammates
Yeah.
these past 4 years in Grand Rapids, and if we would have dropped the gloves, that's something we would have definitely hashed out since we've been buddies since.
Right on.
Well,
Some of the other guys I'm looking at, Jared Lucas Savage is a young guy. I saw him a ton at Denver. There's, a lot of young guys. Chase Pearson, Tangradi, he's a veteran guy like yourself. He's still playing. So you got that mixture like, you see in most teams in the American Hockey League. Where were you guys at as a group before everything stopped? Were you guys having a pretty good year, or how are you feeling, Matt?
There's definitely a transition right now with Detroit's organization, with Steve Yzerman taking over and trying to take that next step from being a rebuild to starting to be a hockey team that can compete every night. Also changed things in Grand Rapids where winning has always been a priority, but development is a big part of it too. And we had one of the youngest teams Grand Rapids and maybe the American League has had this season. And so with that, you get the ups and downs. So we had some inconsistency out of the gates, but it seemed like as our young guys got more experience, Mo Sider, the first round draft pick, Valeno, those other guys, Pearson, one of our most consistent players down the stretch there at center, Rass, a lot of these young guys, first, second year pros, 18-year-old, 19-year-old, 20-year-olds, they made up a big chunk of our team. And as they grew, I thought we were really starting to hit our stride there late in the season. So it can be frustrating to be it's frustrating for everybody what's going on, but it seemed like we were really starting to become the group we wanted to be.
Yeah, and I've said for years, and you're in it. You've been in it for a few years. Detroit, to me, was the model. They develop players better than any team in the National Hockey League. Take us inside that a little bit if you can, and just maybe share some insight to that.
Yeah, I think you look at Detroit and the model they've had for years as it got passed down to the American Hockey League was if you're as much as development and giving opportunity to players, they also had to earn it. So you look at some of these young guys and they have to compete with the older guys, and nothing's going to be given to them. If you can't beat older player in the American Hockey League out of a job, you're not going to be playing for the Detroit Red Wings. And so that was started at a competitive level as a group, And I think when competition's at the core, I think that often breeds a lot of success.
I know Grand Rapids has been the longest stop in terms of your pro tenure. I live on the east side of Michigan, as does Ben. We refer to Grand Rapids in that area as the West Coast, but holding NCAA regionals there when I worked for the CCHA, it's almost like Grand Rapids is a hidden jewel, isn't it? I mean, it is a really, really nice city and community and has a lot to offer. So you can put on your Chamber of Commerce hat for a minute.
Yeah, nothing but gratitude for being there for obviously the longest stop. As I told you earlier, I got a 4-year-old, so it seems like he's growing up there. We live in downtown Chicago during the summer, so it's a short drive around the lake. But the downtown, even from when I first came into the league, and you seem like when you play on the road, you try different restaurants out, and you get around town here and there. It's one of the best places to be. I always call it a little big city because it has all the amenities of going out, restaurants, bars, music venues, but without the hustle and bustle and without the commute. So really felt home there.
When you were younger, Matt, were you a Wings fan in any way at any point in your life?
I mean, being born in the 80s and growing up in the 90s, it's hard not to enjoy watching the Detroit Red Wings and watching Sergei Fedorov and watching Yzerman and these championship teams all the way into the 2000s. I can't say I was a Red Wings fan at the time. I grew up in Los Angeles and being a Kings fan, but
right.
Late 90s, early 2000s, the Kings weren't there. It was pretty special watching Detroit do what they did. And it was some special teams. It was enjoyable to watch. Definitely the competition that they had, the rivalry they had with Colorado, second to none. And it was just good for the game.
Matt, there's you mentioned names off the top, Mark Kaufman and Sioux Falls, and I know Mike Eves and Marco Siki. Well, who are the coaches along your stops that have had the biggest influence on you?
Yeah, well, definitely starts at as your first coach, and that's my dad. Still is today a mentor. As I was saying, growing up in the locker room, I don't know if I said it, but played goalie, and he still does play goalie. He's 65, still outside of the last month or so, plays twice to 3 times a week, and we've always I learned a ton from him. And it wasn't easy when you were younger, but never let me win at anything. Kind of remembering a lot of these things now as being a father myself. Didn't let me score on them until I could earn it. So I remember the first time you step on the ice till I was in high school. But once I was able to start scoring on them, which still somehow has my number, I didn't hold back at all. So being my first coach, obviously my biggest influence. But as my career went, as I was saying, Tom Ward at Shattuck-St Mary is the prep coach. This calm demeanor, worked unbelievable with kids. He was with the Buffalo Sabres for a few years, and I believe he's back at Shattuck, which is a pretty special program, and he was a big reason it was. Also, Kaufman gave me an opportunity at Sioux Falls, like I was mentioning, and Mike Eves taught me the probably with some tough love, the two-way side of the game, the defensive side of the game, which is probably a big reason I'm still playing today. It wasn't easy at the time because everybody wants to be a top 6 forward, but that's not always how it works out. And If I'd gone somewhere else and maybe it was always the guy getting the opportunities, you never know what your career is going to turn out to be. But Ben, just like we were talking about that team in Cleveland,
Yeah.
David Quinn gave me my first opportunity, just coming in there on a tryout, which not many guys do, and he let me play and gave me those opportunities. Mark Oliver, obviously not a coach, but one of the GMs there. Pretty grateful for some of these opportunities that guys have given me along the way. And like I was saying, as opportunity to play in the National Hockey League probably kind of left, I kind of found my second win playing for Todd Nelson in Oklahoma City, and in the Oilers organization. Gave me this new love for the game, and probably one of the biggest reasons I've played the last few years. Definitely, I followed him to Grand Rapids, and obviously was able to win a win a Calder Cup with him. That was huge. He was obviously a big part of that as well.
He's now in Dallas, right? Assistant down there, isn't Nelson?
Yeah, he always he's a different breed.
Yeah.
It's hard. You have talks. You have your exit meetings at the end of the year, and they want to know because he can be a coach at the National Hockey League level, and it's hard to always pinpoint why coaches have the success they'd have, but he kind of talks about the arts and the science of it, and the science is probably like the X's and O's, and the arts, he always says, is building relationships and gaining trust from your players, and probably the arts is a lot more important than the science. And at the end of the day, guys would go through a wall for him because he ended up just being one of the guys. If you got your job done, you worked hard, we got to have fun as a group, and we obviously got to win as a group.
It's great.
Is that, they talk about the grind of the Stanley Cup playoffs and, playing every other night, and you're just beaten up at the end. No different than the Calder Cup playoffs. You guys, I think it was Syracuse you beat in the championship this year. Tell us how much of a grind that is, and a championship's a championship to your group. A Calder Cup, Stanley Cup, Centennial Cup, whatever the cup is, you're champions, right?
Yeah, I take a ton of pride in it. We had a really special group. It's just as hard. The guys at hey Bennett, my little guys running around outside. Sorry, we're that team we played against in the finals, that Syracuse team. Obviously, I haven't had the chance to play in the National Hockey League, exhibition games here and there, but that was by far the best team I ever played against. So to get the job done, we played some very good teams along the way. Milwaukee, we won 3 games. We beat them twice in overtime. I think Chicago won our division. Winning there wasn't easy against a rival. San Jose led our whole sorry, my little guy's just running around.
Oh, good,
San Jose won the whole league in the regular season, and travel from Grand Rapids to San Jose is not as leisurely as the NHL gets it, so that makes it a little tougher on your body when you're in your 30s, or anybody, but Syracuse, a lot of those guys are with Tampa and part of the success they have now, and I believe the reason why.
Yep. Yeah, well, Matt, really appreciate you doing this, man. It's great to see you and, catch up, man. I always appreciate everything you did for me and our time together there. And we did have a lot of fun there with that group, man. It's
yeah, we had a good time.
We
Thanks
did.
for having me on, guys.
You bet, Matt. And it's great to see you doing well and still playing until they, I guess, tell you you're done then, right? You're going to keep playing for that long, or do you have a timeline? You mentioned next year.
I take it year by year, but the goal hasn't changed right now. So I love doing it, and that's one of the reasons why, right there.
Yep. I get it.
Bringing him to the rink every day. Usually, any day that we don't have a game day, get done with practice, come back and pick him up and throw the skates on with him and run around. It's pretty special. So I enjoy doing that, and enjoy being there with the guys every day. I was trying to think before we were on here today. I was going to see if you wanted any good stories too, but I thought when we were together in Cleveland, but I couldn't think of a specific Cleveland story because that was 12 years ago we played together. But I was with Oklahoma City, and we were playing in Cleveland, and Wednesday nights, all beer nights, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And Wednesday nights, there's not usually a ton of fans either in some of these places in the American Hockey League. But Jason Williams got a penalty in the first period, and all the fans right next to the glass were trying to get him to drink. They weren't much bigger than a Dixie cup, these dollar beers, but
right.
trying to drink a beer in the penalty box, and he wouldn't do it. But he had a couple of assists, so he was probably feeling pretty comfortable that game too. But the next thing you know, he got another penalty, and I don't know if that was planned or not. But he said if he went back in the penalty box, he was going to drink one of those beers. And so, sure enough, second or third period comes around, he gets a penalty. No one's watching the penalty kill. Everybody's just staring at him in the penalty box. No one's watching the play on the ice. Coaches, players, everybody's looking to see if he's going to drink one of those beers. And he takes his glove off, waves it over. They slide it over between the 3-inch divider, and grabs the beer, puts his head down, comes back, has an empty cup, slides it back over. Well, in the meantime, I think Travis Iwanek or Cale Cassidy was coming off the ice. I was supposed to go out there, so we played 5-on-3 for a few seconds, but it was well worth it because we got a good laugh out of that one. I don't think that's happened very often since, but Jason Williams, pretty player, similar role at that time of his career was me, but obviously had a lot of success in his Detroit days when he played in the National Hockey League.
So
I'm just glad you didn't bring up the story when I almost missed the plane in Vancouver.
Well, you probably weren't the only one. We were all
I wasn't
tired that morning.
Yeah, no, I wasn't.
Guys had some fun there when you get to stay overnight in Vancouver. That's always a privilege.
Yeah.
You have to take advantage of it because, well, especially now as you get older too, you stay out on the road. There's some pretty good cities in the American Hockey League too.
Yeah, there are. Fred, you got anything else?
No, I'm good. I just want to thank Matt for his time, and make sure you save those skates when they finally cut them off you and get them bronzed.
Well, hopefully we'll get to be on the ice here soon, but I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on, guys. I enjoyed this. Take care, guys.
We did too, Matt. Thanks for doing it. That's Matt Ford, captain of the Grand Rapids Griffins, top farm team of the Detroit Red Wings, joining us on this edition of No Holding Back. For Fred, I'm Ben. Thanks for watching.